Hi everyone, I'm Matilda, your host today. We are going to examine closely the passage in Psalm 37 and verse 4. It says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." We'll look at what this verse is really talking about. So let's get to our group today.
Greetings everyone. We are all glad you joined us today. As Matilda said, we are going to talk to you about Psalm 37 and verse 4.
Psalm 37 and verse 4 states the following. This verse encourages finding joy and pleasure in God, as it promises that God will then grant the desires of your heart. Here's a more detailed breakdown.
I'm going to take this first part, delight yourself in the Lord. This means to find pleasure, enjoyment, and contentment in God, His character, His word, and His ways.
I'm going to take the next part. And He will give you the desires of your heart. This promise is tied to delighting in the Lord. It suggests that when our hearts are filled with joy and pleasure in God, He will then grant us the desires that align with His will and purpose.
This is where a lot of people get it wrong. They feel that if God doesn't give them what they want, then God is lying? No way. God will not lie to us. Remember what Daniel said. He will then grant us the desires that align with His will and purpose.
God is not just going to hand you everything you want, but it needs to line up with God's purposes. Here's how to interpret this promise. Some interpret this verse as God placing desires into our hearts that are godly, or as a promise that God will provide the desires of our heart without struggle, frustration, or experience.
Our focus must be on God. The verse emphasizes the importance of focusing on God and His Word to cultivate desires that are pleasing to Him. When we do this, our desires will change to be godlier than self-centered.
This has been great. I hope you learned all about this verse. It's time for us to go. The podcast will start right after us. See you later.
Welcome everyone to our podcast today. Hayden is with me here in the studio again. Let me start us off today by saying, does God's power have limits?
Well, Leo, I'll be glad to jump in here. God is not limited in His knowledge of everything. God has the power to do all things according to His will. In Matthew 19 and verse 26, it says, "But Jesus looked at them and said, 'With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible.'" ESV. In the NIV it says, Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." There is really no difference between these two translations.
I love these two verses in Ephesians 3 and verses 18 and 19. It says, "May have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God."
We as God's people need to learn how wide, long, and high and deep is the love of God. At times I don't think we can grasp the power of this love that God has for us.
The next verse says that we may be filled to the fullness of all God has for us. Imagine that we think God doesn't care about us at times. when He, the creator of the universe, still has time for us and cares about us.
That is so awesome. One last verse for today. In Jeremiah 32 and verse 17, it says, "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." This tells me that nothing is too hard for God. We must remember this. He really does love and care for us.
Wow, this has been awesome today. I hope all of you out there learned a lot about the limitless power of God and how much He really loves you. See you guys next week.
I don't know about you out there, but I am overwhelmed by the power and limitless ability that God has, and how much He really loves us. Kept in mind that God sent His one and only Son to die for us, so that we can have everlasting life by coming to faith in Jesus. So, nothing, I said. Nothing is impossible with God. He is all-powerful and limitless. We will be back next week.